for the 2020 election is that we got a lot of candidates from around the state who were able to join our meetings because we were on Zoom, that they wouldn't have been able to come to the Moonrise or wherever we were meeting. So that is a benefit. Though I had hoped we could meet in person tonight. Are we ready?
We're streamed. I don't know. Are we ready to mute everybody? I'll go ahead and do that and unmute you, and then
okay.
I'll allow people to unmute themselves. Or actually, I think we usually don't. So.
I am unmuted now. I can talk again. Welcome to the 28th Ward Regular Democratic Club meeting for February 2022. My agenda says 2021, so it shows I'm still not into the new year. And I'm so grateful that you all could find us on Zoom tonight. Sorry for the last minute change. I was really hoping that we could meet in person. And I held out hope that the forecast would be wrong, but we came to a decision early this morning that it was really safest for all of us to meet this way. We didn't want to have 3 people at the Moonrise and trying to handle technology. So I'm grateful that you could find us here. My name is Ann Kitloss. I'm president of the club. With us tonight also are our committee people, Gail Farwell and Mike Gras. Mike is also our vice president of the club, our tech guru, and you'll be hearing a lot more from him later with other hats that we hope that he'll be wearing. Deborah Lovelace is our secretary, and Parker is sitting behind her helping out. Christina Bennett is our treasurer, and she is taking a class that is on Tuesdays and Thursdays nights, and so isn't able to join us. One piece of business for Deborah's benefit, please sign in the chat. If you are on another device like Facebook Live, you can sign in there too, and we'll go back and capture those names. It's important for us to know who's here for when we do have endorsement elections. Part of the criteria for being eligible is to have attended 2 meetings in the previous 12 months. And so we do keep track of who is here for that purpose. You also need to pay your dues for 2022. So if you haven't done so, I think there's a link in the email that I sent, and I hope you'll be doing that. We've got a couple of important topics we want to get through tonight, and I know that we've got some elected officials online, and we want to give them every opportunity to share what's going on in the work that they're doing, and we want to have plenty of time for questions and answers throughout. So without further ado, I want to start with our featured topic. The St. Louis Public Schools are working on a comprehensive plan, and that's about as much as I know. Thankfully, we have 2 members of the school board who live in our neighborhood, and they've both been invited tonight. I see Matt Davis is here. Matt is a Central West End resident and treasurer of the school board. So why don't we start with Matt? And is Alicia here yet? I haven't seen from my.
Yes, she is.
Screen. She is? Okay, so Mike there she is. Mike, could you please unmute Matt and Alicia so they can share with us what is happening with our public schools? And thank you so much for the work that you're doing.
Well, thank you, Ann, and thank you, everybody. Thanks so much for inviting us. I was elected in April to my first term as a Board of Education member. I'm actually the secretary. I'm glad I'm not the treasurer because we have about a $400 million budget, and that would be way over my pay grade.
Sorry about that.
But I don't want to take too much of Alicia's thunder because she is vice chair of our citywide plan committee, but I'll kind of give an update from my perspective. We kind of have 2 major initiatives going on. I'm the chair of our legislative and advocacy committee, which we started this year for a number of reasons. One, we've been very intentional about trying to improve our relationships with the city, the Board of Aldermen, as well as city departments, and that kind of leads us into the citywide plan. but also we have been very much concerned about advocating in Jefferson City. If you read the news, the last 2 years, but this year in particular, has been just an absolute assault on public school districts in just about every state, but Jefferson City is certainly no exception, as a lot of our conservative friends have jumped on the national bandwagon and used the pandemic as a reason, as an excuse to, and try to enact some very, very harmful legislation. There's about 180 bills that we've been tracking this year, none of them good. You've probably heard about things like critical race theory. That has sort of morphed into what I would just call teacher censorship bills. And there's about 5 or 6 that have been passed out of committee already in the House, as well as the Senate in Jefferson City. They're couching it as transparency bills that they'll call it Parents' Bill of Rights. But if you really dig into them, if any of these passed, it would be devastating to an already sort of devastated field in education. Teachers would be able to be sued for saying certain things or teaching certain things that would be on this list. So that's probably the most egregious thing that we've been seeing. But in terms of our focus, not only joining with school districts across the state, and also there's been a lot of sort of equity groups as well. The Clergy Coalition, the Jewish Federation have all sort of banded together to fight that. And so it's been good to see that there's been a lot of pushback on those bills. But in terms of the Board of Education, we landed on 3 legislative priorities. One is to protect local funding. There are 2 bills, and this is the 3rd or 4th year that they've tried to get these through. It's House Bill 1552. It's also Senate Bill 869. They're sort of going in tandem. You may have seen it advertised by charter school lobbyists as fix the glitch. What it is the way that the schools are funded here in St. Louis. Charter schools, which began about 20 years ago, receive all of their funding from the state. So they get that from the state formula. That then reduces the amount that go to the public school district. In exchange for that, the public school district has always been able to keep all of the local funding. So property taxes are the biggest component. In St. Louis, it's a very unique situation because we also have a sales tax which funds desegregation programs in the city, that was part of the negotiated settlement for the deseg lawsuit. It's worth noting that tomorrow, the 18th of February, is the 50th anniversary of Minnie Liddell filing that deseg lawsuit, Liddell versus the Board of Education. So sort of a historic moment in St. Louis, and we're still fighting. We're still fighting. That lawsuit continues 50 years later. And so part of what this legislation would do was take that sales tax, which is specifically designated for the St. Louis Public Schools to provide deseg programs. That includes our free preschool program. That includes the magnet school program, college and career program. And then one of the big expenses is, as part of that magnet school program, is the transportation because you can go to a magnet school no matter where you live in the city of St. Louis. That's a $20 million expense. So we taxed ourselves in the city of St. Louis to ameliorate the sin of segregation. The state, because we did that, the state is off the hook to pay for that. And so this bill would take that money and give it to charter schools who are under no obligations to provide those deseg programs. So that's my quick political speech about what we're doing in the legislative committee. But that also there's also a tie from our legislative committee, and I'll lead into Alicia about the citywide plan. Last year, the Board of Education, prior to Alicia and I being on there, had the difficult decision to close a number of schools. They closed 8 schools. Part of the reason is because of the sort of drastic loss of population in the city, in particular, school-aged children. Since the last census, we've lost 40,000 school-aged children in the city of St. Louis, an astonishing number. We are on track to become a city without children. And I can't say it any other way. So as a result, our education system, our system of schools, which was built for a population of 800,000 people, we have over the past many decades closed schools and continue to do so. But we made that difficult, the board made that difficult decision. But as a result, they also passed a resolution calling for a moratorium on the opening of new schools. We actually, while we have less children in the city of St. Louis over the last 10 years, we have less students enrolled in schools. We have more schools than we had 10 years ago. There have been over 30 charter schools that have opened over the last 10 years. Half of them have closed as well. So we have this sort of nonsense system in the city of St. Louis where we just sort of open and close schools, and there has never been a plan, a citywide plan to decide what our system of education looks like. So in last January 2021, the Board of Education passed a resolution calling for everyone to come together and to do a pause on the opening of new schools. As part of that, we asked, as a non-binding resolution show of support, we asked the Board of Aldermen to mirror that resolution. They did in October after very many hours of a hearing in the Education Committee and also many hours at the floor of the Board of Aldermen. They seem to be having very long meetings these days. And that was one of them. 24-1, they supported the call for the Board of Education to do a pause on the opening of new schools so we can work with the city, with all of the other education stakeholders in the city for a citywide plan for education. So that has sort of been the work of my committee on the legislative perspective to not only work in Jefferson City, but also to build some support for this work locally. And then I can now turn it over to Alicia to talk a little bit more about what that committee is working on.
Mike, can you unmute Alicia Sonia, please?
Hi, everyone. Hey, Matt.
Hello.
So I'm Alicia Sagne. I'm also on the Board of Education for the City of St. Louis. I think Matt and I started about a month and maybe some change apart. I lost by 26 and then got appointed to the Board of Education because we had a vacancy. So I think Matt gave a lot of great context to the citywide educational plan and kind of like why, and even like the process that came about and things that have happened so far. So before we joined the board, like he said, there was an acknowledgement, I think even back then, of that we had a declining population of youth, but like constant increase of schools. And so like anything else, it would be like continuing to have, you got less and less patients, but you're having more and more hospitals. And so that was the case in education. And so the board asked that we have a citywide plan. And then shortly after we got appointed, it kind of got some steam because there was some people who were starting to do some things around education that didn't involve the Board of Education. And so we kind of decided like, okay, it's time for us to reclaim this process. And so one of the first big steps in that was that resolution going through the Board of Aldermen, calling for a moratorium of no more schools. And that's for all schools. It's not, I think sometimes people get it confused thinking that it's like anti-choice but it's not. It's just acknowledging that we need a plan in place because what we're doing is not sustainable for any of our scholars or families in the city. And then the Missouri State Board, MSBA, Missouri State Board Association, also passed a resolution acknowledging like what was going on. And so we've developed just the beginnings of a citywide plan. What I really want to do in this space is lift up the website that we have that has a lot of goodies on it. So if you go to slps.com, there is a tab specifically for the citywide plan where we have kind of compiled everything that we have started. We are in the very beginnings, introductory phase. So The plan itself is not developed. We've just begun to identify pillars and focuses and to bring major stakeholders in the city together, and are moving towards developing that. So if you go to the citywide educational plan website, there's some good videos on there to give you context. You can also access all of the meetings that we've had so far as a part of the citywide plan, and then also some of the presentations that also help to provide context of why a citywide plan is necessary. The goal of the citywide plan, the ultimate goal, is to present a plan to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and to state legislators who have the power to undertake a plan for managing schools in ways that ensures the best educational opportunities for all students, no matter where they choose to learn. And then there's a lot of other things on there. I don't know, I would love to just kind of respond. I don't want to repeat anything that Matt kind of already said, but love to respond to anything else. And I would just say, I'm vice chair of the Legislative Advocacy Committee too. And I think just as a board, we are trying to, I think we've known for a long time, there's a lot of problems in our city. And especially right now, there's a lot of attacks on education. And I think some attempts to redefine public education and who has to say so over, history and what should be taught and what that looks like. And so we are just trying to, as a board, make it very clear the city and where we stand and how we feel about education, and to, bring our leaders together to create some solutions to problems that have, that haunt us, have been bothering us and are continuing, I think, to be exacerbated, especially by a pandemic and things like that.
Thank you. Are there questions? If anyone has a question, you can either wave or you can use the reactions button on Zoom. Oh, wait, I saw somebody. Hold on. Where was that part? Deborah? Mike, can you unmute Deborah Lovelace, please? There you go.
Thank you. Matt, you made reference to bills in the legislature that have to do with critical race theory. Can you just, I don't know if you can do this, but can you define what the bills believe is critical race theory? I mean, how do those bills define critical race theory? And what exactly is it that they're banning?
Yeah, that's the problem, because they can start off in the beginning and they'll say things like you can't teach critical race theory, or the 1669 project. Those are the two big sort of buzzwords that you see. But then when it gets down into the devil's always in the details, and when they start defining things, a lot of them say things like you can't blame somebody for something that happened in the past based on the category that they belong to. So the example that always seems problematic, like, well, if you're going to teach about the Holocaust, you can't say, well, it was caused by the Nazis who were German. Like, that's just like a basic fact. That's not an indictment of Germans. That's just a fact. So that's probably the most egregious example, but it's worded so broadly that, teachers would be scared to death to teach anything about history, honestly. Probably if it just said you can't teach critical race theory, we'd probably say, okay, whatever, because we don't. You don't teach a law school or graduate level class in elementary school. You don't. So, fine, whatever. If that makes everybody feel better, we'd agree to that. But, it's stupid, but they pass a lot of stupid laws that don't mean anything. But when you get down to those definitions, that's why I just am trying to frame it, and a lot of other people are saying it's a teacher censorship bill. It's literally so fraught that you wouldn't be able to teach anything about history. So the critical race theory, they've moved away from it. So they really did start talking about critical race theory in the 1669 project, and then they got into those definitions, and people were like, well, this is crazy. You're really just, it's going to be impossible to teach history. They've changed it now, like I was saying, And now you're going to see the ones that are probably going to be most likely to advance to be called parental bill of rights. But then that gets into, well, there's going to have to be automatic reviews of curriculums. And then if people object to curriculums, or they'd have to opt, everybody would have to opt into certain lessons about history. And then they put in, some of these bills have penalties. So if you violate any of these strict rules about letting people review the curriculum or object to the curriculum, or you don't give them the appropriate notice that you're going to teach about race or slavery or any other historical facts, then they're subject to lawsuits. I mean, the most egregious one is up to a $10,000 fine that someone could sue a teacher in a school district for $10,000. And the person who sues, if they win, they get to keep 20%, and the other 80% goes into a voucher program. So then you can take your kid and take the public money and then go to a private school. I mean, the level of insanity is so infuriating. And there's so much of this garbage out there. So yeah, Deborah, I mean, it just gets worse. Then they just try to up one another and try to make it crazier. But it's really very, very frightening. And our greatest hope is that the Senate continues in a dysfunction, and they're never going to get anything passed anyway.
Alicia, do you want to respond to that at all?
I don't really remember this specific question. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's all right. I just wanted to give you an
I agree with everything Matt said.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Patrick, did you have a question? Mike, can you unmute Patrick Deaton and then Wiley Price, please?
Yes, this might be a question for Alicia. How does the city schools in St. Louis rate with other urban districts? Are all the urban districts around the country having the same problems? And if they're not, is there some city somewhere that we could look to as a model to improve our schools?
That's a very large question. As far as how we rate and compare to other school districts, I think St. Louis is we're a very unique city. We have one of the larger districts. A lot of other districts don't have them, and it really depends on what you're specifically looking at. And I think also what makes St. Louis very interesting is that even within the district, all of our schools are not uniform. So we have schools that have different focuses, and we have schools that have different academic, outcomes and academic levels of achievements and different economic breakups. And so there's a lot of factors that go into each school. So it'll probably be hard to compare SLPS to another district for that reason, just because, even comparing two schools within a district, you sometimes can have completely different data sets. But I would say that certainly as far as certain things, there are things that we can look at. I know things that we've talked about on the board a lot. It has to do with things that we've seen other cities do. I know that we have we talk a lot about Kansas City because they're right here in Missouri. So some of the things that I pay attention to is I see that some other cities have, like in Kansas City, they have a cap on like their tax abatements and incentives that can be given away, which directly impacts school districts. There are other places where they have, if you're a large nonprofit tax exempt entity, you would pay a payment in lieu of taxes to your school district. I think Matt and I were talking about an article not too long ago that was talking about the impact that a district, they transitioned to having like 4 days instead of 5 days, and like the impacts of that. So I think certainly, and it depends on the specific issue that you're talking about, there are things that we can look at and things that we can learn from. But St. Louis is just very interesting, very unique, given our makeup and even the broad differences that we have within specific schools within our district, because we're just so large. I don't know if Matt, if you want to add anything to that.
I would just add one thing, because I think it gives it it gives it some context in terms of, and again, I keep focusing on the fact that tomorrow's the anniversary of the DSEG lawsuit, to sort of show how there's still such a discrepancy in our city, and that leads to the schools. So we have approximately 20% of our student population meets the federal definition of homelessness, which doesn't necessarily mean they're living, in their car in the streets or in a shelter, which is part of it. But it just means that they have some very serious housing insecurity problems. And so that's the federal definition. That is 14% of the entire population of students in the state of Missouri that are classified as homelessness. 14% are in one school district. That's our school district. So, while, in the chat, they're talking about Metro, we being, one of the top, we've got Collegiate, McKinley, as in terms of high schools, we've got some of the gifted elementary schools that, the test scores are great, but you would expect them to be great because it's a selected population of kids in those classes. But, we accommodate all those kids, but we also have to accommodate those 5,000 kids that are classified as homeless. And, you're not going to have great test scores if you don't have electricity, or if, you are moving from house to house. It's just not going to happen. Not to mention the amount of trauma that a lot of our kids have face. I think I quit counting, honestly, because it was just too much, but I think it was about 90 kids last year that were reported victims of gun violence. 19 were murdered by guns, and those were our students. I'll say that again, 19 children in the city, or 90 children in the city of St. Louis were shot. I mean, it's very tragic, but in a suburban school district, a teenager dies in a car wreck, and it's in the news for weeks. There are memorial services. Do we have any of that in the city? I mean, we ignore it. But yet those kids, their families, their classmates, their teachers have to come to school every day and deal with the trauma of, the difficulties living in poverty in the city. So, and we've been trying to address some of this and address with the city. Yusuf, I think, was on the job for maybe a couple weeks, and we invited him in to talk to us about how we can work better to start dealing with this. We've been trying to, use as much of some of this federal money, both in the city and that we have, to start addressing some of these issues. But in terms of how do you rank the schools when, we're competing, in these rankings with people that have none of these issues, at all. They don't have issues of having to fight for be able to keep their tax base because the legislator's trying to give it away to private virtual schools. So I don't know. The ranking is difficult, and I could go on forever about the challenges that we have. But I always sort of bristle when people say, "Oh, the SLPS schools are failing." When you have a school where every kid qualifies as homeless, how do we judge the success of that school? It certainly can't be test scores.
Yeah, I would also add that that I think we saw there was some numbers, data recently that 90% plus of unhoused youth in the city go to a SLPS school. So most of those kids do go to our schools. So it's, to compare when you have such unique challenges and not the same advantages is, something else we talk about often is like the average teacher salary at SLPS is $41,000, but if you go right over to Clayton, you at $81,000 for the average teacher salary. So it's I think before you can do to imply that there could be a ranking would imply that there's equity and equality in terms of resources and in terms of support that our kids have at home. And because we are in the city of St. Louis and we know what our issues are here, you just really, you can't rank. I mean, there's no standard base to start at when you have the types of issues and challenges that we have to deal with.
Thank you for those very, very passionate and compelling responses. We've got questions from Yusuf and then Wiley. Heather, I think you were going to unmute them. Yusuf Scoggin, please.
I guess it's semi a question, but it's also just a comment. I mean, one of the challenges when it comes to the charter school movement is also how it was really restricted just to St. Louis City and St. Louis, and then Kansas City. And so both of our urban communities were treated as the experiment. So thinking about 50 years ago, as you mentioned, Matt, I'm also thinking about Tuskegee and how we were experiments then, and now we're experiments on the charter school movement. My question is, would the conversation be different? Would the halls of Jefferson City be filled with different folks if charter schools had been open to every school district in the state of Missouri, inclusive of Clayton and Ladue, et cetera, for those to pop up out of there and siphon off their money? So it's just a comment, but I think just the inherent nature of the way it was set up is more than questionable.
So every year they try, and particularly this year, they try to expand charter schools to every county in the state. Last year it passed, and I defer to the representatives, but last year it passed the House. The only way they got to pass the House was if they put a population exemption. So all of the rural districts, who would make up the majority of the legislature in the House, we're not going to vote for it until they exempted them. So then, it was something that one of the representatives, I think it was Rachel Prouty from Ferguson, said, if it's not good enough for you, why is it good enough for us?
Representative Price, you had your hand up. Heather or Mike, can you please unmute him?
I have asked to unmute.
Maybe he's gotten called away. So I had a question. I noticed that the Archdiocese is going to be taking a look at its properties and schools in the city. And I wonder if when they go through their rounds, I know that, their population or their students are moving, or there a lot of new churches are being built out in the county and they need to make some changes. Does that impact when schools shut down in the Archdiocese or in the Catholic schools? Does that affect the public school population at all?
It doesn't really, but we've had we've had a sort of, not with the Archdiocese, but with some alder people and some representatives who are involved with the Archdiocese to make sure that they're included in the citywide plan. There's ways that we can all collaborate, charter schools, public schools, private schools in the city, and I think we have to, whether it's just extracurricular activities. Part of the pandemic has helped this effort to some degree, because when we all shut down, we all had to work together, because we all had to make sure that we got food to kids that needed it, and everybody had that problem. We needed to make sure that we had childcare resources for critical workers, for nurses and doctors, because all schools kind of provide that as well. But they've been affected by the same things that we have. We've lost population to charter schools. Catholic schools have lost population to charter schools, but we've also all lost population because people are not having kids in the city and they're moving somewhere else, especially on the north side. That's the biggest population loss of kids. It's just been sort of drained out. If you look at the numbers, it's really startling.
Okay. Representative Price, can you get in? I know you were having trouble unmuting yourself. If not, feel free to put a comment or a question in the chat. And that reminds me to remind everyone to sign in the chat so that Deborah can keep track of who's here. Are there any other questions? I don't see other hands up. I'm sorry we didn't get that one in. This is really enlightening. What else? A lot of us here, our kids are out of school age, but are obviously still concerned citizens of the city. So what are the things that we can be doing? Our ward is interesting because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, but I don't think we have any SLPS schools in the
current 28th ward. It's just sort of an interesting thing. Hamilton is, just because it's in that little wedge over there, so that would have been one, but we don't have any in the ward. A lot of, but then you look at other parts of the city, they've got 3 or 4, and they've got 3 or 4 neighborhood schools that are very important. I think, it's just really interesting when you sort of look at how things have moved around and how our system has developed. So, I live on a street where there's tons of kids. And if you look at the ward map, we just are sort of in this sort of area where there's a bunch, but then there's other ones where there's not. And I can go down my street and there's some SLPS kids. We go to different schools. There's private school kids. There's charter school kids. We all sort of represent everything. And so I don't want to make my remarks seem like we're anti-school choice at all, because that's just not the world that we live in. But at the same time, we're all struggling with the same sort of issues in terms of this population loss. And I think the one thing that, I know Alicia would agree with me that we talk a lot, is just to sort of get out. There's this impression, I think sometimes, and especially in our ward, because we don't have schools, that, we don't need SLPS schools because there are a bunch of choices. And if the competition is going on, okay, well, so be it. People are going to make their decisions. But the issue is that, at the very least, the public school district provides sort of a backstop for the city. In addition to talking about the most vulnerable children, we have a school that is solely dedicated to refugees and immigrants, where they actually had to move into a new building. And the goal of that school is it's Naheed Chapman School over off South Grand. The goal of that school is refugees and immigrants come to the city of St. Louis, they're placed here, and they attend that school. They have lessons in English. There's lessons in English for the family. And really just in some degree, I don't know if I like this word, but assimilate, so they can go into a neighborhood school or another school, to become productive citizens. That's something that is, there's no other county schools that are doing that. There's no charter schools that are doing that. Something that is SLPS in particular. We have preschool for 3 and 4-year-olds that is free. We were the first ones in the state to provide that service. And we still do, and that's done with our local tax money. We have 3 schools that are solely dedicated to kids with special needs. We have the career and college technical program. So, the district has got to be strong in order for this to be a strong city. We sort of rise and fall together. And I just, that's the message that we're trying to deliver to people, that this is really something that if you don't have kids that are still school aged, or if you don't have kids that attend, the public school district, we still need a strong school system.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Price, are you able to speak now?
Yeah, I am able to speak now.
Oh, good.
I despise Zoom meetings for this very reason. I hate that they're still doing them at the Board of Aldermen because of the mute button. I just don't like the mute button. Anyway, there's been a lot said here in the last 30 minutes or so about the legislature. I should have been keeping notes. There's so much to jump into. Well, I guess I'll just go, if I can go off memory here. The conversation about DESE and test scores, I think that's the heart of the problem, is that we're the metric that we're using to grade our children's success is a test score that has arguably not really been geared for Black children, and that's the large portion of STLPS. Furthermore, I think that's the problem. A child's success shouldn't be dictated off the test scores. It should be dictated off their personal progress, in my personal opinion. I'm not a teacher. This is not my lane. That's why I don't work on these bills. I talk to people like Matt Davis and the president and Paula Brown. These are the experts in this lane. It's my opinion, again, that you shouldn't teach a child or grade a child on his test, that and the test isn't even made for his experiences or maybe even what he's being taught. And then the trickle down effect is that the teachers aren't really teaching what life skills or what's necessary. They're just teaching for the test. So I mean, in my opinion, I think we should alleviate DESE completely. I don't even think that they should be. I don't like the formula. I understand the formula, but I mean, it's set up really for failure in a lot of ways. The issue that I have with charter schools is that the conversation has always been, how do we teach Black children? But there have never been Black people at the table for that conversation, not alone even in the room. So now here we are with all of these different experiments going on. Some of them fail, some of them don't. And some of them are actually really good, but there's no actual model. In the 50s, when the St. Louis public schools first started, we were a national model on how you should teach children. Didn't matter if they were Black, white, pink, purple. And that's the problem with the charters, is that we have a system that is touch and go, really. It's like, oh, there's a good idea. Maybe we should try this. And it's like, well, I mean, I'm not willing to continue to experiment at the risk of losing more Black kids. When you talk to people like Dr. Choi, who's the president of Mizzou and the UM circuit, I asked him straight up. I was like, what can we do as legislators to help you in upping your enrollment and giving you a better product? And he said, work on our K through 12s here. I mean, that is the problem. So in regards to the CRT and the 1916, the problem with that is that nobody knows what they're talking about. CRT is the study of the United States and its histories and its foundation, and how racism has basically been baked into the system, our healthcare, our education, housing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even as Mr. Scruggins pointed out earlier, to our healthcare system. And I think the Tuskegee experiment is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a book out called, it's called Medical Apartheid. And they go over 300 plus years of experimentation that were done on Black bodies. I mean, in reading that book, I found out the practice of OBGYNs started on Black female slaves, and there was no anesthesia. They were just poking around. So anyway, I digress a little bit. The point that I'm making is nobody in the legislature that is on the Republican side that is opposed to CRT in 1916 even knows what it is. Because if they did, they would be concerned about it, because it's not being taught to high school children. It's an elective that you get in 13th grade. Like, so the frustration that I have as a legislator and having these conversations is that when I break them down, they always end with, oh, I didn't know that. But
Okay.
the politics is starting to be more emotional than it is practical. And so the 1619 project, CRT, I don't think those are going anywhere. The Senate doesn't have an appetite for that. Senate Republicans are saying that they do, but when it comes to like voting on them, they just had fast track this week. Fast track passed, but they tried to put a CRT caveat in there where you couldn't teach CRT at the school or you wouldn't get the funding for fast tracks. The Republicans voted that down, which sends a red flag that there is no appetite for any conversation of CRT or 1619 on the Senate side. So I think we can kind of gear down on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry to go so hard.
Thanks, Representative Price.
I'm sorry.
Appreciate that update and the passion for sure. Senator May, did you have a question or do you have a comment? We need to move forward with our meeting, but I want to make sure if you've got a question for our speakers that you have an opportunity to share it.
Sure. Thank you so much, Anne. I appreciate it. Basically, you know, the question is this. Right now, the Missouri legislature, and first of all, you know, Representative Price was absolutely right when he was talking about DESE and the testing and the formula. Back in 2011, we sat down and had this conversation with DESE, and they were using a system that were not geared toward African Americans. So that is absolutely correct. but I'm subsequently hoping that they've made some changes since then, because we did give them the opportunity to do that. But the question is this to the school board members right now: what's happening at the state and what's we're facing on the floor right now. You know, this court case, this lawsuit that's happening right now. The pressure is coming from the charters to have the public money, the tax money that is currently being given to St. Louis Public Schools split. And you might have had this conversation before I got on. I'm sorry I was late.
Yeah, it came up a bit.
Okay, so, you know, what the legislatures and the senators need from you guys is, you know, continued information and support in reference to, you know, talking about, you know, that money, you know, sharing that money with the charters. We understand SLPS has other expenses that the charters don't have from desegregation and transportation funding. But that's the conversation on the floor. That was the conversation the last week of session last year. This is the vote that probably will come up sooner than any vote that we're about to have. That vote right there, and the lobbyists are heavy in reference to that issue right there. Kansas City has an MOU, a memorandum of understanding, and they've settled with the charters. What we're trying to do is delay this vote until after the lawsuit, because I think that we will be premature to pass anything before the lawsuit is settled. But your input will help us in the legislature. That's my comment, Ann. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Any final message from you, Matt or Alicia? We really appreciate this time.
No, I take every opportunity to thank Representative Price, Representative Collins, and Senator May. Senator May, we were up there. Well, you know, you introduced SLPS parents on the floor of the Senate. We had about 50 SLPS parents go up last Wednesday. It was kind of a unbelievable thing, you know, to go and meet with legislators. It's never happened before, as far as anybody can figure out. We also testified. Dr. Adams, myself, Tony Cousins, and other board members, and some other parents testified in the Senate education hearing exactly what you were talking about, Senator May. So we appreciate all our local designation support. You guys are great. And anything that you need from us, we are trying to engage as much as possible, not only as board members, as well as parents. And we appreciate any support from the community as well on these issues. They can be complicated. And there is a lot of lobbyist money, some of it from out of town billionaires, flowing into these issues to sort of attack our public school district. So, you know, any help that we can get, we'll take it. And we're there to provide any support that we can help our local reps in Jeff City to fight for us.
Thank you. Ms. Saunier?
Yeah, I thank you for, you know, inviting us to this meeting, and same, I echo Matt in thanking Rep. Price, Rep. Collins, Senator May, even Yusuf. I mean, I think what I think we've been trying to do is open the door for a lot more conversation, a lot more engagement. And so, you know, even though it's new for us to testify or to have advocacy days at the Capitol, it's certainly just the beginning and not the start. And I would say, just for final marks, I feel like I've heard a few comments. Like, I know in the beginning you were like, you know, there's not a lot of parents here who have kids in the district. And one of the reasons I decided to run for the school board, even though I'm 26 and I don't have any children yet, is because, you know, just like when we talk about crime, when we talk about health, when we talk about these other city issues, we don't say, oh, well, I don't have a family member that's sick, so you know, what's going on with the sick population doesn't matter to me, or I don't currently have a family member that's incarcerated or that's been a victim of crime, so I'm not going to worry about, you know, crime. Education needs to be something that we start to take that same stance on. What I know, and I think what all of us here know, is that if you do not have a thriving educational system, you don't have a thriving city. They are interconnected and there is no way around it. So I would encourage us to not think of it, you know, your only involvement of not, just because you don't actively have a child in a district, or even if you made a different school choice for your child, anything that happens with us being the official public school entity has an impact, or what's not happening has an official impact on the city. And I think that, we have to not create these imaginary barriers and walls and lenses as far as like education and even social justice being separate issues. They are very close and very interconnected, because I think we talked a little bit about, at the end of the day, the types of the scholars and the students that attend our schools who we love, they have unique challenges. And until, just like we see in other areas of issues, until all of us have a chance to succeed and get access to resources, we can. And then also, kind of in reference to what was mentioned earlier, SLPS does offer a lot of services that charter schools don't, and they're not required to, and they also don't have the same level of public accountability just because of how the systems is offered. So yeah, I just thank you all for having us, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm going to put my email in the chat, and hopefully you guys can, the citywide plan, we meet on every fourth Wednesday of the month moving forward, and all those meetings will be public, that you can see. So if you can't attend, follow that. Same thing for the Legislative and Advocacy Committee. Just try to stay up to date with what's going on, what's happening, and always feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. This has been really, educational, pardon the pun. My grandfather spent his career as a football coach in St. Louis Public Schools, and my great-grandfather as well. So I have deep ties to the school system. So I appreciate you joining us this evening. Moving on to our next topic, our former alderwoman is here with us, Heather Navarro, and now she's playing a role of letting me know who needs to speak and who's showing up for the meeting, because we're in a period of transition. And to share where we are in that transition is our own committee woman, Gail Farwell. So Heather, if you could unmute Gail and then Mike Gras, that would be awesome.
Thank you. This is really hard to follow. I've learned a lot about the St. Louis Public School issues that we have, and hopefully we can help make a difference. At least I'm going to look forward to participating. Tonight I wanted to really, hopefully by now you've received the committee woman's letter introducing Mike Gras as our new nominee for the 28th Ward Aldermanic position. I just want to give you a little bit of information of how this transpired, and that according to the city charter, when there was a vacancy, the committee people, women and men, had made the nomination to the central committee, and the central committee would vote as far as who our nominee would be. I know that a lot of people are probably a little bit confused, or I don't know if confused is the right word, but things are a little bit different this year due to Prop P that we have. We still fall under our old the 28th Ward boundaries. So we will be having a special election according to our charter on April the 19th. And as a committee person, a committee woman and man, we actually met and interviewed people. And what we were really looking for was someone to nominate that had the knowledge and ability to jump into the role at such a critical time with Heather leaving. And we really wanted someone with a relationship and respect necessary to advocate on our behalf, the 28th Ward. After speaking to several people that were interested, there was no doubt in my mind that committee man Mike Gras was the perfect person for this position. And the reason I say that is that Mike has proven that he is involved in the ward. He's a proven leader. He's able to advocate for us, because easy to jump into the role without a lot of issues. So I'm really just very proud and honored to nominate Mike to be our nominee. So when I took it to the Central Committee, we voted. It was unanimous that Mike be our nominee. And what I'm asking from you is to give Mike your endorsement for the election on April the 19th. He is the person for the job, and I look forward to working with him. And I turn the mic back over to you.
Back to me. Well, let me just clarify that because Mike, because there is no primary election in this case, and he is the nominee of the Democratic Central Committee, therefore he is the only Democratic candidate. So we
Right.
won't be endorsing him in the normal way. What we want to do is give him every
Support.
opportunity to speak, lots of questions, and then give him an affirmation from us to move forward. So before we do that, we need to hear from him. So here we go, Mike.
Sure. And I'm going to go back to gallery view while I'm talking to everybody, because I feel like then I can kind of like look at my audience as opposed to just myself or one person. But then I guess that messes up the screen. So I'll just get started. My name is Mike Gras. I know plenty of you guys here, but for those of you who don't know, I am the current Democratic committee man for the 28th Ward. And as Gail just said, I am now running for alderman of the 28th Ward in the special election on April 19th. Before I get started on my little spiel today, I want to let you guys kind of know where I'm at in the process. I've spent the last week or two interviewing and talking to several campaign consultants and several campaign managers about, putting together a team. I think you're hearing my son. I'm going to talk about him in a little bit too, and about why I'm doing this. But I am talking to several campaign people and putting together my staff, but I don't have it all finalized yet. So this little speech, this little stump speech, if you want to call it that, these bullet points, this is all straight for me. This is not shopped through any comms person yet or anything like that. So I hope you're interested. But what I kind of want to share with you guys is, a little bit about me so you can understand my perspective as I'm approaching this job, and then a little bit about, what I'm going to try to focus on while I'm here or while I'm on the board. First, to hear about my perspective, I think you're hearing my perspective right now with my kids, and I know it's kind of cliche to say, and I think before I had kids, I was kind of the person that when people would, always talk about how the kids are the most important thing and all that, you don't know what that means until you have them, for me. And it really is just a total change of perspective. And they are my entire world. I'm just head over heels in love with them, and everything that I do for them. And I think they're trying to listen in right now to hear what's going on. But secondly, though, besides my kids, I am a proud husband to my wife, Allison Walsh. She is a OBGYN in private practice out at Mercy Hospital. She also runs a lifestyle medical solution practice as well. We live together in the same block as the Cathedral on Maryland, right down the street from the Cathedral. Been here for about 5 years. And before that, I grew up in St. Louis, lived in St. Louis my entire life, lived in Dogtown, lived in the county, lived in Brentwood for a while, grew up in, like I said, West County. And I'm an attorney. And I think that that's the final big piece of the perspective that I'm bringing to this job. I have really been blessed with a varied legal career. I have a pretty wide breadth of experience. I usually tell people that the only thing that I really don't know anything at all about is family law. I don't do anything with divorces or child custody stuff. But besides that, I know a little bit about almost every other kind of law. And I've also, through my practice, while doing a lot, I've done a lot of litigation. And through litigation, I've developed skills that I think that will be helpful for this job, namely, ability to negotiate and ability to look at a problem, look at a situation, identify all the levers that can be pulled, identify all the interests that people have in a room, and sit down with everybody and try to figure out a solution. The other part of my legal experience that I think is going to be more kind of directly related to this is I have had experience as a municipal lawyer in my career. I have, represented people in front of boards trying to get liquor licenses, conditional use permits. I represented St. Clair County, Illinois. in a lawsuit in the opioid litigation. I am the current municipal prosecutor for Florissant, Missouri. I'm also municipal prosecutor in Maryland Heights. So I do, traffic dockets a couple days a week for some county municipalities. So again, I think that's a little bit about me. That's a little bit about the perspective that I'm bringing to the job. But what I want to talk about is what I'm going to be focusing on. And I think first, I just want to kind of describe the overarching focus here is the 28th ward as it sits now. Because, with ward reduction happening just a year from now, Gail and I, when we were talking to folks and we were deciding, what we were going to recommend to the central committee as far as an alderperson, we were really concerned that anybody we would be selecting was going to be focusing on, parts of the ward that they may be wanting to run in next year, et cetera. And since I've already been representing the ward in the capacity of committee man, and I know folks kind of all over, I think that it's important that we focus on that because, every other current alder board, every other current ward in the city still has their sitting alderperson. And if we have kind of a vacancy or if we have an alderperson that doesn't have their head on the bounds of, the ward that they're elected to represent, I think we're going to be at a disadvantage. So after that kind of overarching focus, kind of like the 3 points I'll kind of talk about. And I'll just be honest, I've stole these 3 points from a couple other former alder people I've spoke to that have given me advice and counsel leading into this position. But, my understanding of the role of alderman is there's 3 points that are important here. First is constituent services. And here in the 28th ward, I feel like we have been blessed with having just some phenomenal alder people, for the last couple decades. Lyda Cruson was as good as it gets on constituent services. And I've witnessed it myself. If you ask Lyda to do something, she'll just pull out her phone and she'll do it right in front of you. So we've been lucky to have that. And I think Heather's only kept that going and completed that. If you talk to anybody, they have nothing but good things to say about the constituent services that we receive in this ward. And I think that that's different than what you hear from about other people and folks from other wards. My biggest focus on that area is, I want to continue that trend and really provide just a wonderful bang up service to the constituents of this ward, however they need it. I think my background as an attorney will help in that regard. I am not afraid to, pick up the phone and call a city department. And, if I think I'm right on something and, some bureaucrats telling me that I'm wrong about something, I'm going to, advocate. I'm going to advocate for our ward, and I'm going to advocate for, the folks that I'm representing. The second kind of area of focus for alderperson that I think is a little bit related to constituent services, just that in that it's ward focus, is development in general. And when I talk about development, real estate development more so. This is a hot button issue going right now, specifically incentives. And I'll first say that if people are trying to develop in this ward and they're trying to build and they're not asking for incentives at all, and they're trying to build 100% private projects, I'm going to be supportive of that. But the more controversial issue when we're talking about development usually is when it comes to incentives and the city's use of incentives. And what I'll say to that is, again, I'm a negotiator. In my background as a litigator, the thing I'm probably best at isn't actually going to trial, but it's going to mediation and trying to settle the cases. So I'm pretty confident that I'm going to be able to go into these conference rooms that are filled with lawyers that are representing the developers and be able to represent the interests of the ward and our constituents well. I'm going to be able to understand the issues, and you know, I like to build stuff. I like development, but at the same time, you know, I think that we need a compelling reason to give away, you know, St. Louis City public school tax dollars. I mean, I think that, and I just want to add my appreciation for Matt and Alicia, and you know, their presentation tonight, because I really thought that it was just great and I learned a ton. But you know, funding for St. Louis City public schools comes from our tax base, and if we're giving away incentives for maybe non-compelling reasons, you know, we're defunding the schools when we do so. So I want to make sure that we're developing smart, that we're pulling the right levers when we do so, and that we're getting the best deal for us, and you know, and not keeping progress going on the same way. Finally, I think the third category of what alder people are supposed to do, my understanding, is focus on kind of like city policy as a whole. You know, I mean, we're a vote on the board of aldermen. We're directing, you know, the direction of the city policy. It's that sort of thing. What I will tell you, I am one of these folks that very strongly believes that vast majority of problems in our city are rooted in poverty. We're surrounded by poverty, and I think that the number one thing that, you know, from a policy perspective we can do to address, you know, public safety, all these various issues that we're talking about that affect our city, is to work on alleviating poverty. So I'm going to go into these city policy perspectives really with the mindset of, you know, these discussions really with the mindset of, you know, how are we going to do that? You know, some of these aren't really developed yet, but, you know, I would say that I have as a, I would say that as a, I don't want to say hobby, but I do have a background and I do have contacts in the startup community in St. Louis. I think like leveraging, you know, that when we're making economic development for folks, we're doing things like, you know, looking at what we can do to help the startup community. We're not doing it to see if we can attract startups coming in from elsewhere to move to St. Louis. I think that we should be focused on developing the people that are here so that they can participate in, you know, next century jobs. And I don't mean teaching them how to program stuff that people need to learn 5 years ago. I mean, trying to, you know, prep them for what's going on in the future. So I'm working on, I have some kind of ideas on that I'm probably not ready to like share for that I would put forward in a bill. But I kind of just wanted you all to know that that's my perspective. That's where I'm coming from. That's kind of where I'm going to be looking at these problems. But finally, just kind of what I'm looking for and what I'm asking for you guys to do. First and foremost, I really want as many subscribers as possible for my email list. One of the things I'm really most excited about in this job is being able to directly communicate with folks. And, you know, if there's something that I think that, you know, people need to know about what's going on in our ward, in our city, I want to let them know. So please sign up for a mailing list. You can do it at mikeforstl.com. I'm going to put that right there in the comments. The other thing we need, I need is donations, because like I said, I'm trying to put together a real first-class team of professionals, and, you know, not just kind of traditional political campaign folks, but, you know, marketing people, professional public relations people, folks that I think that can help me reach people that in the ward that aren't reached by the traditional political means. So to do that, though, I need donations. I need money to hire folks and to put together my team. So I will drop my ActBlue link also in the chat. And I will do all that once I get done talking. Other thing I will say is I'm trying to meet as many people as possible. So if you want to grab a cup of coffee and hopefully maybe invite some of your neighbors and your friends, I would love to do so. If you want to have me over and you know, chat about whatever's going on, I would love to do so. And on that same note, I'm going to be sending out a survey to ask everybody kind of what's on their mind, what's going on, what neighborhood groups I need to be aware of, what, meetings that need to start getting on my calendar, what's on your mind. Fill that out when you get it, but don't wait for it. If there's something on your mind now, just send me an email so I can start getting on my radar. And then the last thing I would ask for is your endorsement. I think Ann is about to ask for it in some way, and I don't know how, but it's been the greatest honor. I shouldn't say the greatest honor, that's an exaggeration, but it's been a tremendous honor to be the vice president of this ward organization for the last few years, and to be the committee man of this ward. So I would appreciate your endorsement in the election, and I appreciate your vote.
Thanks, Mike. I think the greatest honor of being vice president of the 28th ward is having just have two wonderful children and a successful professional wife, but anyway, I'm excited about Mike's candidacy, and he's been a great partner with this organization, and really kept his ear down on trying to get to know the community in the years that he's lived here, and get involved and connect with people in the central committees, connect with people in the ward, connect with people in City Hall. And so we are not, like I said, going to have a traditional vote, because we wouldn't be putting up another candidate for this role, but we would like to ask for your support. And if you would, before we do that, in kind of not that we're doing Robert's rules here, but do people have any questions? Does anyone have anything they'd like to ask Mike before we just do a round of applause or some way of showing affirmation? Do people have questions or comments about Mike, for Mike? Wave, raise your hand.
Yeah, I should have asked that first.
Well, and there will be other opportunities. We have another meeting in March. Joyce is giving a thumbs up with a fabulous photo. Marianne's giving a thumbs up. So why don't we just, Newton with the 2 thumbs up. There we go, in actual real life, the Hugheses, Gail. Why don't we do a round of applause if folks are feeling it, to show our support for Mike and his candidacy. We will, as you know, look at that, all those applause. Please do reach out to Mike. He's very accessible. He's very excited. He's got a lot to learn. He has a lot to offer. So please reach out to him if you've got questions, if you've got advice, any support you can provide. And as we mentioned, we actually have 2 elections coming up here, 2 reasons that we're going to need to go out and vote. One is the general municipal election, which is April 5th. And then this election, because of the timing, could not be, the special election for the 28th Ward Alderman could not be at the same time. So we're actually going to have to go back and vote on the 19th of April. So we're going to be looking for support for help at the polls. We'll be sending out information on behalf of the organization, but it's going to be a lot. And it's unfortunate that we have to get our poll workers and our polls out twice in April, but it's worth it. I hope you'll vote in both elections, please. Now it is time that we have worked through that. Does anyone have any questions about the elections and why it's happening and the dates and anything? Well, I'll be putting out that information. Thank you, Monica Butler, supporting the Gospel Music Hall of Fame. That's just so beautiful what you're doing over there. Gayla wants to know if there's any opposition. Mike says not yet. Filing has not, anyone who wants to run for the seat, so Mike gets automatically on the ballot because he was got the nomination from the Democratic Central Committee. Others, if they wanted to run, have to get signatures. They have to get 300 signatures and file them next month. And so, but we'll see if anyone comes up with the desire to do that. And then this seat is up when we have ward reduction in a year from now. We'll have elections in both the 9th and 10th wards. So that, that's in the future. But we really need good coverage for the 28th ward for the next 12 months. And I'm really grateful that Mike is offering to provide that for us, because our two alderwomen in the 17th and 26th wards have their hands full with their own ward activities. And as much as they will be available to help us and have committed to do that in the meantime, it's really helpful to have someone representing the interests of the 28th ward. State Rep Collins has got her hand up. Kimberly Ann, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. I wanted to know, I hope I'm saying this right. Did the last Aldermanic election, did those people run without the D's next to their name? Did they just run non-partisan? And is that happening this time? Because I thought that's what happened last time when all the candidates were running in the different wards. They didn't run as Democrats because of the proposition. So how does that work this time?
Yeah, I can address that. So basically, last time it was Prop D applied and because it wasn't a special election. And since Prop D applied, it was the whole election was nonpartisan. So people didn't have the party designation behind their name. In this case, now, since it's a special election, the special election's in the city charter, so Prop D theoretically doesn't apply to it at all. Now, because there's a provision in state law that says, the city can govern how elections are conducted by ordinance, and Prop D is an ordinance that says that the election should be nonpartisan. The Board of Elections currently is saying that this election, even though I was nominated by the Democratic Central Committee, that it's still going to be a nonpartisan election, so that I would have no designation behind my name of D. To be perfectly honest, I think that's wrong. I think that's a mistaken view of the law. I've had several conversations with the Board of Elections about this. Alderwoman Sharon Tyus on the Board of Aldermen, she has wrote a letter and wants to have a hearing on this issue because she thinks that the D should still be there. So that hearing is actually going to got rescheduled today till 11:30 on Tuesday, and it'll be available on Zoom. And I was going to actually send out the meeting about that anyway. But what might actually have to happen is, either myself through my campaign or the Democratic Central Committee, and I see Senator May has her hand up, or the Democratic Central Committee, we're probably going to have to file some sort of like declaratory action judgment lawsuit to get clarity on whether or not the D will be there. That signifies I'm a Democrat. But I want to be very clear, though, that right now, that's the only ambiguity there is with this election. Everybody else in the entire city, everybody's on the same frame of mind that, the elections with the old boundaries of the 28th ward, my nomination from the Central Committee was good, et cetera. This is kind of the only ambiguity left.
Senator May, did you have you have your hand up?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm exactly what Mike is saying. Yeah, we're thinking about filing some clarity in order to get clarity on it. I do believe that Prop D is silent in reference to special elections. Also, the Board of Aldermen, to my understanding, can actually change, from Prop D right now, because it's not permanent as of yet. So we definitely need some clarity on it. There's something on the ballot in this municipal election coming up that is trying to make Prop D permanent, along with, I'm not sure if anybody, I'm trying to think of what that is, but it's something on this Prop R. That's what it is. Proposition R is on the ballot this municipal election, and it has some language in Prop R that is trying to make Prop D permanent as well. So those are some discussions that we're going to have at the Democratic Central Committee meeting this coming up last Saturday of this month. If anybody want to tune in, we'll probably be doing that meeting by Zoom as well. That's all. Thank you.
Senator May, I know that the League of Women Voters has asked to speak part of our meeting in March on Prop R. So if you want to come back, or if there's another speaker on that issue and partisan, nonpartisan voting, that would be a really great conversation to have at that meeting. I know that we have heard, this is the time when we shift to our elected representatives, and from what I can tell, all have had a chance to speak at some point. I don't know if Senator May or Rep. Price or Rep. Collins. I know we also have Alderwoman Shamim Clark Hubbard on. And would like to give her a few minutes. Why don't we start with her, since she hasn't yet had an opportunity to speak, except at the very top of the meeting before most people had signed on. We need you to unmute. Are you not able to do it? Are you going to do?
Okay, thank you. Yes, in the interest of time, I won't take up much, but to just say good evening to all that weren't on at the beginning. I'm always excited to be over here and share this space with you all. Congratulations to Mike. I told him that after the initial meetings, and reached right out to him and told him that I would love to continue the relationship and the example that myself and Alderwoman Navarro set, working together, working across the Delmar Divide, bringing our communities and our neighborhoods together the way we have. We often get complimented on it. I'm very proud of that. Excited for Heather. I was, it was bittersweet because I'm really happy for her and her transition, but it was sad to see her go. And I did immediately reach out and say that I will continue to stand in the gap for you all however I can. Looking forward to helping Mike transition into the position. And I'm glad that he understands clearly what the position is so that we can get him right in and get right to work. So my information was in the chat earlier. I'll put it back in just in case someone missed it. And everyone have a good evening. Stay safe out there.
Thank you. I also saw earlier Pam Ross had her hand up. So Pam.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little update. We are going to open the childcare facility on the Forest Park campus at the community college in October. There'll be 80 spaces for children that start at 6 weeks. And inside that is the family center, which will have laundry facilities, a food pantry, tutoring for the students, parenting for the students. And also, I don't know that people are aware of this, but when students come in and they aren't up to college standards, we used to put them in remedial classes, which didn't give people any credit for those classes. So many people just got discouraged and dropped out. So we changed to a system where we put we put students into the classes, and the classes that they need help with, we give them a tutor, which allows them to continue their education without this, spending a lot of time doing things that really don't make a lot of sense for any of us. So that's been a big improvement. We're going to open up a new health facility on the North Campus at Florissant Valley. So it'll be much like the one we have at the Forest Park campus. So we also had a 25% increase at Forest Park, and we think it is probably due to the new building and the upgrades we've had on that campus already. I'd also like to let people know that we have a dental clinic, so you can get cleanings done and some other dental procedures there. We don't have a dentist, but we do have a dental hygienist program. So just to let people know that you can get some routine dental work done there. So that's all I needed to share tonight. Thank you very much for letting me talk.
Thank you. The new building is beautiful, and I'm really glad that there's going to be childcare available at on campus and anywhere these days. There's so little
Right.
childcare. Are there other representatives, elected officials who would like to add a few more words? We've got about 5 minutes, and I know I think I just saw, yeah, there you go. Kimberly Ann's hand is up and Senator May's hand is up. So why don't we start with Kimberly Ann? She's had less time this evening to speak.
Thank you. I feel like I already talked so much in my newsletters. And so I was going to say in the chat, unmute me. But I just want to reiterate and just throw out there that the candidate filing opens up for us for the August primaries on February 22nd. And even though the new congressional and state Senate districts are not quite yet there, and it will, it will not reflect it's not reflecting the 2020 US Census track. And so that's still going on. That still has to be figured out, but candidate filing still will open up. And then there is, I don't know if you all have been filing the ballot initiatives that the GOP have been trying to pass in the state legislature. So there is a House Joint Resolution 70 that would make it pretty much impossible to get ballot initiatives on the ballot. It would drastically bump up the threshold for proposals, to be put on the ballot. And so I'm in opposition of it. I know Representative Price is in opposition of it. Many of our Democratic colleagues stood up on the floor this week to speak in opposition of it. There's that spending bill that the governor proposed, the 5.5 pay increase. And then Republicans wanted to shoot it down to $12 an hour for some of the other state employees in the state departments, except for those who are rendering direct care for people. So that's like DOC, Department of Mental Health, Department of Social Services, Children and Youth Division. But I know the Senate is working on restoring that. And then there was that HJR, I think it was HJR 117, and that was the Medicaid expansion. So they're trying to make it impossible and block services for people to receive that Medicaid expansion funding. And so those are some things to look out for. I'll have them in my weekly newsletter. That'll come out tomorrow. And I appreciate everybody for allowing us to listen. And this was one of the greatest 28 ward meetings that I've ever attended. I would have showed my face, but I'm currently laying in the bed. So I appreciate everything that you all are doing. And go, Mike, you got my support. And let me tell you, you got to tell them that you live in the 77 district. And when 77 district residents show up and show out, they turn up and they lead. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And you have my full support.
Thank you, Representative.
Thanks. Senator May.
I just wanted to touch on some of the same things that Representative Kimberly Ann Collins touched on. In the Senate, we did, according to, they passed the thing that the House said that $12 an hour for state workers. The Senate went with the governor's position. So we're hoping that state workers will get the $15 an hour. We were able to vote that out of the Senate. Just to let you know, Representative Collins. And also the Senate has only passed one piece of legislation since we've started. The whole fight has been about the congressional drawing of the lines. And so right now, there is no decision. They're trying to do a 7-1 map in the state of Missouri. I'm just letting all of you know that because we could use your support. They're holding rallies and everything in the Capitol in reference to a 7-1 map. The state is voting 60-40 Republican, which if we have 8 congressional seats will give us a 5-3 map. And so they're wanting a 7-1 map. So this is what we're fighting. We've been filibustering since session started. So we need your help. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. And we also have a guest from the 18th Ward, Committeewoman Yogi Yancey. Would you like to say a few words?
It's not letting me, I'm muted. Can you hear me?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Committeewoman Yolanda Yogi Yancey. I'm It's not my first time on the ward calls, but thank you all for the invite. Congratulations to my former committee friend, Mike Gras. Good job. We are so proud of you and excited for your new position. Of course, you have our support. Me and Ms. Gail, you know, we got your back as always. Saturday, we have along with committee man Joe Palm from the Mighty 26 Ward. We'll be having a crime elimination summit. Joe started it over in the 26th Ward, and at the last one that he had with Mayor Cruzen and everyone, he said he was going to bring it over to the 18th. So we're doing it together on Saturday, 11 o'clock at Centennial Christian Church, which is 4059 Fountain Park. So all of your city elected officials, as far as the 18th Ward and the 26th Ward, will be there. We have a lot of community supporters that will be there, including the St. Louis Police Department, St. Louis Fire Department, just tackling topics that are based off of crime. And so when we get together and we get the minds together, we can come up with some solutions. More so, I think everybody's doing great work, but our state reps and our Senator Colomé will be there as well. And so I'm looking forward to everyone coming on. You all are welcome to come by and join in and participate, because we want to get all the minds together. So see you all Saturday.
Thank you. It is 9 o'clock. That is it's 9:01. Pretty good. 9:02. Let's see. Ms. Collins, you had one more thing, and then Joyce.
I got one more thing, Miss Ann. I failed to say this on the call, but I don't know if any of you looked at the new lines for the 77 district, but it does incorporate now all of the Central West End. So everybody that stays on the other side of Kings Highway, like right across the street from Straub's, going all the way over to Union, you are now in the 77 district. And so I just wanted to say that.
I know you're speaking directly to me, so thank you. Joyce Roberts has her hand up.
Good evening, everyone. I just want to say thank you for allowing my colleagues to come before you with news that's happening with St. Louis Public Schools, and again, to enlist your support as we try to advocate for all kids across the city, and to let you know that I will seek a re-election in November to serve a second term on the Board of Ed. So thanks so much, and I'm asking for your support. Have a good evening and be well.
Thank you, Ms. Roberts. Well, that concludes our formal meeting. There's a lot of information in the chat. If you didn't catch it, a lot of phone numbers, addresses, requests for support. So please take a look at that. We'll be having more candidates showing up in our meetings as filing is next week. So starting in March, we'll have more candidates, which is always fun. I'm really grateful that all of you got the emails today. I'm sorry to inundate you, but with the late change to move the meeting online, I wanted to make sure that that people saw the email. So I'm grateful that you did. I hope there weren't a lot of people over at the Moonrise. Hopefully they had a nice drink with each other or something. We will be back in March, hopefully in person. One little tidbit is that our next meeting, the next third Thursday, is St. Patrick's Day. So I don't know what that means, but maybe we'll have a good time. We always have a good time. Anyway, it was great to see you. Stick around to informally, we'll take everybody off a mute. But if you need to sign off, be safe, be well, and we'll see you soon.